there is a topic that sometimes is a hot topic in D&D, and that
Yeah.
is being a cleric, but being a philosophy cleric. It specifically says in the Dungeon Master's Guide, you can in fact be a cleric of any domain
Mhm,
and it
mhm.
be of a philosophy. How do you handle this in your own games? Because not everyone wants to be tied to a god. Um,
Certainly, certainly. I am fully in the camp of this is one of those things you want to talk to your dungeon master first, because world building is so important to dungeon masters, so important to like setting the tone for a campaign, that you just want to talk about it first. And
yeah.
for myself, I tried to reach some kind of compromise. I've used all of the options that are in the DMG, the loose and tight pantheons, monotheism, dualism, and all of them. I really like mystery cults and include them in any campaign that I can fit them in. Um, I like it. I think, I'm reminded of things like the Athar from Planescape, who like deny the divinity of the gods and yet still can, you know,
Hmm.
cast cleric spells and the like. The Priest from third edition was another that I really liked. Um, I've had players who want to be gods of or clerics of themselves, that like they just have deluded themselves into thinking that they're gods. Um,
I
so
have Apis.
right, that was one of Emma's characters. So I like it, but I do think it's one of those you want to check with your DM first, because it could, if you're like dead set on a character of a philosophy or a cosmic force or something, then you run headlong into the DM being like, well, I don't know, we're say playing in Theros, and so it's kind of important that your relationship to the gods, features pretty prominently.
It does bring in interesting questions. So if you are, because it's more about you attuning to an idea or an ideal, much in the way like paladins often do.
Hmm.
I I get trickery. Like I play a character who often is a trickery domain cleric, especially if people need a cleric in the party. I will do it just because of that. That's why I started doing it.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
Trickery, it makes a lot of sense, but like you're so full of subterfuge that like the weave has just become twisted around you in some weird way. So I feel like that's easy, but then it gets difficult when I'm like, okay, how is the Tempest a philosophy? How do you play certain of these domains as a
Yeah.
philosophy?
I think like, well, so now I think about it, any of the nature themed ones, so nature, light, tempest, those could easily be reflavored as a certain druid, right?
Hmm.
Like you're just sort of a flavor of druid without the class. Um, to me, what really sets the cleric apart from, say, like a warlock, right? Like a lot of people make comparisons between the two. A warlock has signed a pact. They've agreed to do something. Now they might have been tricked into doing it. They might not, once they realize what they're really gotten themselves into, they might not like it. But like the cleric draws their power from their devotion, right? Like if you read everything about the cleric and what it is that really defines them, it is that they have devotion to something. Paladin has sworn an oath. That's where their power comes
Hmm.
from. The
Hmm.
druid draws their power from nature and primal magic. But the cleric is like, they can channel divine energy because they have a devotion to a particular ideal. And like in that sense, any of the domains, just think of them like that. What's the ideal form of this? So tempest might be a seas or the storm, like you just the roiling chaos of waves crashing against the rock, and it projecting that as a type of cosmic force, or idealizing it as representing something universal, and then like worshiping it
Hmm.
is what that's how I approach this. In that sense, all of the options, forces, philosophies, different types of gods, and different sorts of arrangements, any of them are up for grabs.
I mean, with that Tempest domain, like you could see yourself as an agent of destruction or chaos.
Yeah, yeah,
Tempest
certainly.
can be many things.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that works. Believing in death in terms of philosophy is quite creepy, and
Yeah.
you could almost play that as a Frankenstein type. It'd be interesting since medicine is a wisdom,
Hmm. Hmm.
skill.
Yeah, I like it as a wisdom skill as well. I know a lot of people prefer it as intelligence, but I think it says a lot about a D&D world that wisdom or medicine is a wisdom skill. Wisdom represents your intuition, your connection with the world on an almost subconscious level. And it's not like the clinical, and anatomical version of medicine that we might think of. It's more like, are you in tune with the body's natural connection to this world? Like there's something wrong when you think of it in terms of medieval humors, right? Are you melancholic or phlegmatic or whatever? It makes a lot of sense. So yeah,
that's interesting because and I really did only think about it just now, because is Victor Frankenstein in fact a death domain cleric?
He could be death, he could be life.
His
right?
obsession
Yeah.
is so
That's true.
intense with bringing people back from the dead.
That's very true.
Medicine is a wisdom stat. We have someone who just cannot let that go. So they almost attune themselves to death itself, perhaps.
Yeah.
And be able to bring someone back. That's kind of interesting. Like, so you almost make them an artificer in how you do it. I would reflavor all those spells in a very kind of like scientifically oriented way.
I
think that would certainly make the death domain cleric a little less creepy for me.
Right.
But it also makes the life cleric super creepy.
Yeah.
But you don't get any of those undead. Do you still get animate dead as a life domain cleric? I think you
get it just as on your cleric list.
That's just the cleric list of spells.
Yeah. Although that does raise a separate issue. There needs to be a reanimator artificer subclass.
I agree. I totally agree.
Maybe in the future, just put it out there in the idea space. Maybe somebody else will pick it up.
Where's my gothy alchemist?
Right.
I know my wife would love that.
But like all of the domains, there's a reason why you don't become a cleric of a specific god. Like when you're picking your subclass for your cleric, it's not like I'm a cleric of Thor, I'm a cleric of Lathander or something. You're already kind of one step removed from the individual god in picking the domains that sort of have a common theme. And so it's like it really is just about reframing how you're thinking about that force. So like Arcane, I love Arcane clerics. I just love them.
You're almost a Jedi at that point, right?
So it's like you are worshiping. You have devotion to the force of magic in the world. This force that, to me, one of the coolest things about listening to Jeremy Cropper talk about it is the background sort of magic of the world. Like magic is not a separate force in a D&D world. It is natural.
The weave literally interweaves everything. It's just how that magic is channeled into that is different.
Yeah. And so you worship that force, that animating, creative, destructive, force that flows through all things. And you can apply that logic to like anything that's in a domain.
Your spiritual weapon is your lightsaber.
There you go. You go.
That's saying. What I'm thinking of other clerics because for philosophy, I think it's a fun exercise because I do sorely love the cleric Tempest. It's a very powerful.
It makes a good, like, you worship like chaos, right? One of the things that I really like about older versions of D&D is that the alignments aren't necessarily reflective of your personal morality, but more like an allegiance to a higher cosmic cause.
Yeah.
So it's like law isn't necessarily I'm a law-abiding, nice guy. It's like, no, I support those forces at work in the universe that keep things ordered, that keep things going. Like if I let chaos take over, we would have nothing. They would undo all of it, And so that's how I usually portray these things and think about them in my head is like, where does this stand on the cosmic scale? Like when Ragnarok comes and it's Thor and everybody else versus Cthulhu and everybody else, whose side do you want to be on? And that's how I think there could be evil people on Law's side. There could be terrible people on Law's side.
Yeah.
And there could be good-hearted people on Chaos's side.
Yeah.
But I like thinking of it in terms of that. That's just how I approach alignment in general, though. So,
well, just because, and I use this often, just because you worship a good deity does not mean that you are a good person yourself.
No.
And I've, like, Palor, often I use Palor clerics doing terrible things in the name of Palor.
Because that's one cool thing about Dragonlance, right? Like the cataclysm is a result of a bunch of lawful good clerics taking over.
Well, yeah, and that's that's kind of the state of things you find yourself in Dragonlance at that time is that, yes, lawful good has become so lawful that anything that isn't lawful good is terrible and evil and the worst thing.
Yeah.
What's also interesting about that moment with the Cataclysm is that all the gods got together to decide to wreck Kryn.
Yeah.
The lawful good ones, the neutral good ones, the just flat out true
Yeah.
neutral ones, the evil ones, they all decide, hey, let's toss a meteorite at them
Yeah.
and see how they do.
Seeking meteorite.
And
Yeah.
that's deeply evil as well. Like you
Yeah.
indiscriminately punished an entire planet.
Yeah. Yeah. Dragonlance has a lot of good stuff going for it, but like its relationship, the gods' relationship to Kryn and everything is one of my favorite parts of it.
Because
Um,
it's not so
It's not black and white.
it's definitely not Tolkien.
Yeah. Oh, not
It
at all.
is dysfunctional at best. It's probably a step past the Romans and the Greeks,
Right.
in terms of like, whoa, like everyone needs to get along. Everyone's
Right.
gonna die.
Zeus never sunk a continent, you know.
He did, yeah. Well, I mean,
Maybe. I don't know.
Atlantis, maybe.
Yeah.
but yeah, seemed like an overreaction
Sure.
to a high priest saying, "Hey, bow before us." But
Hey, that's
the fun of
what
it.
you get in a world where, you know, the platinum dragon walks around as a bumbling old man that you could just meet on a country road, you know.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
There you go.
That explains a lot about Raceland,
Yeah.
and his journey to become a god as well, because he's not entirely wrong.
Yeah.
And it certainly does worse things than the gods, but you don't necessarily know. I don't want to spoil too much, but like there's a lot of destruction involved. One might say total destruction.
Yeah.
But who knows who actually caused it
Yeah.
in the midst of the battle.
Yeah.
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 I'd be very curious just to get one book about those, I think 5 years.
Yes. Yeah. That would be
is fighting.
be a
I don't
good
think
one.
they ever did novelize, put that into actual story about like what went down.
I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember. I'm way in the weeds on Dragonlance now because I remember the annotated volume. That was my favorite. But one thing I want to talk about with Clerics is like I like flipping the relationship on its head. Like if you read the description of Clerics in PHP, it's like the gods have chosen this person. They've invested some of their power in them.
Right.
I like thinking it of, a cleric, they're born this way. They are a mortal who is capable of channeling divine power, and the god needs them.
Ooh.
Right. Then that to me, that then justifies the cleric being able to worship and devote themselves to anything because it's within them that their power lies.
Yes.
And so the god has to convince, to persuade, to puff up, right? Like, oh, you're the best. Like, I don't grant all my priests this power, but
that makes things easily go very dark,
right?
Oh my, that's a step.
But I like doing it that way. I think of it in terms of like lightning, right? Like lightning requires there to be something like a charge within the ground as well as in the clouds to be able to strike, right? Like it's something like that. It takes two of them to do this, and the most important one is the mortal capable of like holding and channeling that divine energy, because otherwise how's the god gonna, they've got to manifest an avatar to come down to the mortal world and do anything, and that costs them something. But if they find a mortal who's willing to take this on, then they can act in the world.
I absolutely love that. I've never thought about that. I think that is fantastic. We also had a question today. How would you play a Forged Domain Cleric? I did. I do. His name is Rend. He is an assembly of magical items that were left on the dungeon floor. They
love that. Yeah.
Eventually became radioactive and congealed and became sentient. He's also like, his consciousness is held within a helm of telepathy. And he's a Forged Domain Cleric. So he literally is just about existing. He is the existence of items, about things that were created. He is the created. And consequently, and he has a very simple view of the world, sometimes murderous, sometimes helpful and healing. And that's why he can resurrect people. He can resurrect them. He can destroy them. I basically use the stats of a Warforged, but his armor is empty.
Yeah.
I love playing the cleric that way. He can hit hard, but he's kind of bumbling and slow at the same time.
Yeah.
He may be actually my favorite character. I love my main character, Avery. I adore Rend. Rend is my baby boy. He looks like Ultron at the end of Age of Ultron with kind of like this Halloween-like face that's been half melted. He's just got like a creepy gait to him, and he's don't say anything too literal because you might end up with an entire mountain full of dead goblins if he takes you literally. And so that's how I play a Forge Domain cleric.
Yeah. I think if don't get too hung up on the Forge name. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with like Warforged or sentient items, which I absolutely love. Rend. I got to put him as an NPC in a campaign I run. But like if you think of it as just creation, the act of creating, the act of bringing raw materials together to make something purposeful and
art
or any, in that sense, it does represent an ideal. It does represent a force in the cosmos. So yeah, that's usually how I would think of it.
Maybe the ultimate one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, everyone. That was our Todd Talks. We covered 2 big topics: the undying versus the undead warlock, the great controversy gripping us all right now amongst the warlock kind, and also being a godless cleric, a heathen cleric, a cleric who just is so devoted that the magic weave wraps around themselves, or in fact, the gods come to them for help because they need some of that cleric energy. They need you to worship. They need your belief.
They need it. Yes.
Jim Davis, where are you found?
Yeah, so I am found currently every other week on YouTube. You can check out our videos on WebDM. We also have a second channel, WebDM Plays, where our Twitch and other actual play shows are archived. And I promise I will be back there soon. It's been a while since I've been featured in a video on WebDM Plays. Up until very recently, I was in Kobold Press's Sunday game, The Last Air, but that ended on Sunday. But you can always check out their VODs on their YouTube channel and see me play my Trollkin Gloomstalker Ranger, who gets the party in a lot of trouble.
That sounds like you.
Yes.
And you have Patreon as well for all like some behind the scenes stuff.
Oh yeah, we got Patreon. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. If you enjoy a rambling, disjointed conversation about D&D, you can get one every week as a podcast.
I think that's our audience,
right?
Awesome. Thank you, Jim Davis. Thank you so much. Be sure to check out Silver and Steel from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific on D&D Beyond's Twitch channel. Jasmine Bueller is a fantastic DM, the best NPCs you'll ever find. I am playing that game with B. Dave Walters, the wonderful Lauren Urban, our community manager, and of course my wife Megan Kenreck as well, as we are up to shenanigans. And this episode's going to be a weird one, everyone. So buckle up. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Have a great day. I hope we got to all your questions.